Sabah al-Khair, good morning, dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni, and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Bringing you the news and views and the untold side of the Palestinian struggle for freedom from a Palestinian perspective. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Mate, I'm very, very well. I've had a great week. It was good catching up with you this week.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I just one day, maybe you'll say this story, but I've been killing myself laughing about your triathlon story. All the way home, I was killing myself. So maybe at some stage, we'll actually get you to say it because you made my day. How are you?
It's important that our listeners know that aside from being, as great as we are, I'm also an accomplished triathlete in the over 40s section, Melbourne 2016. Yep. But anyway, more importantly, Rob, we are joined by a wonderful guest, our friend, Dr. Jordy. She's a historian who lives on Wurundjeri land. She's the author of Anxious Histories, Remembering the Holocaust in Jewish Communities at the Beginning of the 21st Century, and a co-editor of the In the Shadows of the Memory, the Holocaust and the Third Generation, and the forthcoming Refugee Journeys, Histories of Resettlement, Representation and Resistance. Good morning, Jordy. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on.
We're really excited to hear from you. You've got a really great story, Jordy, so perhaps we'll lead it off with a very simple one. Tell us your Palestine story, your journey to Palestine.
Sure. So, I'm Jewish. I'm a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and also of other kind of British Jews. My family all came here post-war, World War II. Grew up in a reasonably Zionist family and community. People who know the Melbourne Jewish community at large know that it's quite a Zionist community. And so that's where I grew up, and I attended a Jewish high school. It's explicitly a Zionist school. So that's kind of the world in which I grew up. And then I went to university and I went out of that, a bit further out of that community. And when I was in first year, I did this subject called Indigenous Politics in the State, and it was taught by an academic, Dr. Wayne Atkinson, who's a Yorta man. And it was a wonderful subject because it was the first time I'd studied Aboriginal history in any serious way. But, in learning about colonisation in Australia, I just kind of started to put things together and started to think about colonisation generally, and sort of started to think about Israel in a new way. And so over the years of my undergraduate and then postgraduate degrees, I just kept reading and learning and thinking more deeply about Palestine and Palestinians. And, I don't know in my schooling that we ever talked about Palestinians or Palestine. We certainly talked extensively about Israel, but Palestinians were made very absent. So, and at university, I just really started to think about Palestine and Palestinians and started to think more critically about Zionism and about Israel as I was doing my PhD and thinking about Holocaust memory and how do we remember the Holocaust. I was thinking more deeply about what does it mean to connect the Holocaust and Israel in the way that Zionist narratives do. What does the nation state mean? And it's, led me to really question the formation of the nation state for anyone, and to really believe in the possibilities of a world without nation states and what that could create. To really think about, Zionism, it was this marginal political movement before the Holocaust. It wasn't the dominant Jewish political ideology, and then post-Holocaust it becomes that. And so I just sort of started to learn more about this history, to learn more about the fact that there are other ways of being Jewish. There are other forms of Jewish political expression, other forms of Jewish self-determination. So there was kind of that piece of thinking differently about Jewishness, but then also, that thinking about Palestinians and meeting Palestinians for the first time, and learning from them and seeing that our lives are connected, that our struggles are connected. Thinking about colonialism as a transnational thing, as something that's occurred in so many places around the world. And so I've been to Palestine. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that's fantastic. It's really fantastic. I was just going to ask, when you started to learn that it wasn't what you had been taught, what was your initial feeling? Because I know some people have the initial feeling of I've been lied to, or I've been misrepresented things.
Yeah.
What was your feeling?
It was absolutely that. And it was particularly, I read this piece by Ella Shohat called, Zionism from the Sephardim in Israel, Zionism from the perspective of its Jewish victims. So the title's a riff on the Edna Said piece. But she talks about how Israel has treated Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews. And I don't know if you both have read this piece, but when I read it, it blew my mind. And she tells this different story to what I'd ever been told. And it was sort of touching on some moments of Jews being taken out of North Africa and in the Middle East and brought to Israel. And I'd always been taught of that as this moment of rescue and this great event. And she shows how, awful it was for so many people and how it was really dislocating and the problems that it led to in Israel, Palestine. And I was furious when I read that piece. And I remember that anger really palpably of just, and when I read more about how Israel has treated Palestinians and understanding what occupation actually looks like, understanding, what is going on and what has gone on for so long. And it was really this sense of having been lied to, and this sense that I think what angered me was I thought if people want to believe that Zionism is the answer, then at least reckon with what it has done. At least be honest and say, this is the cost of this form of Jewish self-determination, and we think that's okay. Don't hide it. Don't lie to us and pretend that these things never happened.
Yeah.
Be honest about what it was and say that we agree. But the fact that they can't even tell us what actually happened, it's awful. It's frustrating. It's dehumanizing to everybody involved.
Well, I think that's a word that should be used a huge amount when it comes to the poor Palestinians, the treatment by Israel. With your upbringing or the talk of Israel, when you met a Palestinian, did you go there with preconceived ideas, or had your reading sort of started you to deprogram the way you were thinking and went there with open arms?
Yeah, so I've been to Palestine twice. Yeah, once when I was doing my PhD research, and I stayed with my high school best friend who had made Aliyah, who had moved to Israel. And this was sort of the end of our friendship.
I was going to say, how strong is it these days? But no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I stayed with her. She lived in Netanya. And we just kind of, I went, I spent a day with Mahsom Watch, who are a group of Israeli women who stand at the checkpoints and monitor the checkpoints, with the idea being that that having the presence of a Jewish mother figure watching the soldiers will affect how they treat Palestinians, without going into what we think of that as a project. It was a transformative day for me, for sure. It was, and I made that connection to them and went there because I had these questions and I wanted to see what it was. And I didn't really know how to go to the West Bank. I wasn't that young. I was 24, but I didn't.
It's still a scary thing to do, especially with what you've been taught. I mean, it doesn't come naturally to do it.
it was very foreign, I guess, and legitimately so. And this felt like a way to kind of see what was going on. And yeah, so it was a very strange, I was in Palestine for a month, and yeah, it was a very strange month, traveling around a lot and spending time there. And so, yeah, that was in 2007, and I was very much critical and questioning and but still on the journey, but a journey that I'm still on to unlearn all the things that I've learned and been told for most of my life, or I guess half my life at this point. But
hopefully much less than half.
But yeah, then I went back again a couple of years ago with a group called Centre for Jewish Nonviolence. And it's an international group who have established these relationships with with Palestinians throughout the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and now further throughout 48. And they basically be engaged in co-resistance work. So we were broken into groups, and I spent a few days in Hebron, basically cleaning out the backyard of, there was a group of us sort of cleaning out the backyard of a woman who lives with settlers on top of her, and they threw rubbish into her garden and had destroyed her entry path. And so we cleaned that out. And then this was directed by Palestinian groups, by Youth Against Settlements. And then we did this big action it was all these different Palestinian groups and Israeli groups on the Friday. And we basically helped a family who had been kicked out of their homes in the South Hebron Hills, out of their cave homes. We helped them reclaim their land. And they're still there a few years on.
That's beautiful.
And yeah, it's called Youth of Subud, and they still have their home. We help them. We all work together to get their homes back, and I think that's probably the most consequential thing I've done in all my activism. It was so real, and to reclaim land, help people reclaim land is a wonderful thing. Yeah, and as we were driving out in the minibuses at dawn, we were trying to get there. We were worried that the army would find out and would stop us, and the army didn't come in until the Saturday night after Shabbat had gone out. And yeah, so the army came in and sort of stole the generator and sort of pushed people around, and it was quite full on for me. But
that sort of thing changes you forever. I mean, it's
yeah.
To me, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yes,
it's not possible to do that.
Yeah, and it was so clear the connections between Australia and the colonial connections, that Australia is also pushing Aboriginal people off their land constantly, and reclaiming land and reclaiming the ability to live on your land without state intervention is a problem here. And that was so in my mind as we drove out to the spot that we would be working at. It was really quite profound, I think, and really, I think those connections are really important.
Because we don't get taught, as Australians, we don't get taught about that at all. The only way you learn is to dig and look for it.
Yeah.
And, I think we did with the Aboriginal communities and the Palestinian communities, they are so similar. They are so similar. But I think back then, colonialism was sort of okay, whereas it was part to do with Israel. It's not. It's been gone for years and years and years, but they choose to do what they like, and the rest of the countries allow it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think colonialism still goes on here, and US and Canada and New Zealand. That's these are other examples of settler colonialism, and we need to see them all as part of an ongoing project. But yeah, certainly what goes on for Palestinians is the brutality is so full on. And the modes of resistance are so amazing and inspiring and exciting. It was a real privilege, and and truly, like, it's a privilege that I have to be able to go there, and I'm very aware of how lucky and privileged I am to have the access to go to Palestine and go wherever I want there. And when I was the day before the trip part, I was staying with a friend in Jerusalem and messaging with a Palestinian friend who lives overseas and who can't go back. It's not an option. He can't go to, he can get into the West Bank, but he can't go to Jerusalem. And he was saying, he used to go there every day, but couldn't go. And so I'm very aware of what the Australian passport enables me to do, and what.
You're using it for good, which is a great thing. You're using it for good work.
It's an extraordinary story, particularly when you factor in the household you grew up in. One can't but feel empathy and sympathy for the suffering of the Jewish people over a millennia and their desire for safety and self-determination. But like you said, if you're a Zionist, just be honest. Stop being devious or deceptive in your explanation. Just be honest.
Yeah.
The fact that you grew up in a house with Zionist leanings and went to a Zionist school, to the professor in first year that you did your Indigenous politics, to come to that independently is as a Palestinian, a great credit to you. I mean, Peter Beinart wrote a piece a few months ago now that has, reverberated across Zionist and Jewish circles in the United States. It's not easy to leave, as I'm sure you can attest to, and I know Anthony Lowenstein personally, and his late mother told me of the challenges she faced because of the book he wrote, My Israel Question. What could a young Jewish child today, or young adult who was thinking about, perhaps doesn't have quite the courage, what could you say to them? What would you say to them?
I think things are very different now to what they were when I was growing up. I'm in my late 30s, and I think, things have changed substantially over the last 20 years. And I think there is more space for questioning, and I guess there just kind of is more space for discussion. And there is, the internet gives people so much access to meet people and to build those connections. And it was definitely, in those fledgling days of social media, of being able to connect with other Jews, particularly in Canada, just sort of randomly, and that sort of that builds that space. And I guess that's kind of the thing, is just read things that haven't been given to you by your teachers or your family. Find things to read. Search online, find your people online. Be open to learning new things. And I think that's a big issue, is like, I think that there is this questioning spirit, and I think that's kind of inherent to so much Jewish practice, is critical thinking. And I think, there is a fear of having your family and your community turn against you. And I think that's, of course that makes sense. I think for me, I think it's just, this might sound strange, and I know not everyone likes it when I make this argument, but also, like, what's more important? Like, look at what's being done to Palestinians. If you lose a friend because they disagree with you, then that's okay. Like, you do good work by doing co-resistance work with Palestinians, and that's important. And you inspire younger people, and that's important. And I think bravery is useful and important, and also scary. But I think taking opportunities to be brave is a really good thing. And also just not being, like, I know I'm very aware that I've spoken a lot about, I guess I'm here to talk about myself, but I've spoken a lot about Jews, and, like, we're just not the most important people in this story, and we have to learn to be quiet and listen and expose ourselves to things that we haven't, heard before. But I think that's the main thing, is just, we're not we don't have to be the center of the story. And there's value in being quiet and listening and learning.
Well said, Jordy.
It's beautiful.
And particularly as settlers ourselves here on Indigenous unceded land, there's a lot that we can do in our allyship with our Indigenous brothers and sisters that is exactly the same as everything you've just said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, why don't you talk us through the Black Palestine Solidarity Conference last year and what you thought of that and your participation?
Yeah, so I went along to that. It was such a beautiful conference. It was so moving to witness those connections being made and to witness the depth of feeling, the knowledge, the insight, the Aboriginal and Palestinian genius and creativity. It was really inspiring. It was just really inspiring to sit and watch and to see this real enactment of solidarity and to think about what that can create. It was so cool.
It was
such
cool.
A privilege to be there. Yeah.
It's so cool. The IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Now, one of the things, I'm not sure if you saw in Senate estimates about 3 weeks ago, Senator Abetz really grilled the managing director of the ABC as to, does he know what it is? Why doesn't he know what it is? What's taking the ABC so long to adopt it? Can you speak to that and the weaponization of anti-Semitism?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't see that. That's really interesting. But yeah, there's the IHRA definition sets out a definition of anti-Semitism and provides a set of examples of what anti-Semitism is. And a lot of those examples are around Israel-Palestine. And so there's growing movements. There's already large, but even growing movements of Jews and others around the world who are saying this isn't useful. This is a weaponization of accusations of anti-Semitism, that we need to take anti-Semitism seriously. Clearly, anti-Semitism is an issue in the West at the moment. There's just absolutely no question about that. But we have to be able to criticize Israel. It's completely legitimate to criticize Israel. It's not inherently anti-Semitic. And the definition is being used, particularly we're seeing on university campuses in the United States, to shut down discussion of Israel. And it's really awful in that regard. And it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help eradicate anti-Semitism or educate people about what anti-Semitism is. It just serves to shut down discussion, an important discussion about what Israel is doing to Palestine and Palestinians. So yeah, I'm part of a couple of networks internationally who are trying to share information and work together to try to not get universities or ABC or anyone else to adopt this definition as their working definition. And in fact, I've forgotten his name, but the man who came up with the definition has written an article, I think it was in The Guardian a while ago, saying that he never intended the definition to be used in this manner. It was just meant to be used as sort of a information piece. It was never meant to be brought in as some sort of strict rule and to be used as a source, as a way to punish people for things that they say. And I think that's really helpful and instructive. And the IHRA definition is incredibly unhelpful, I would say, as that kind of tool.
And one of the things they talk about, the new word, the cancel culture.
Yeah.
As if the people that aren't cancelled the most are Palestinians or advocates and allies of the Palestinians.
Exactly. Yeah. Which we've seen recently, right? There's been some Zoom has even shut down conversations about Palestine recently. This absolutely, it's yes. These are the people who are most often not given the space.
When this IHRA definition is used, with the bulk of when 6 of the 11 examples reference criticism of Israel as being forms of anti-Semitism, what you get ultimately is a situation what we had, our friend Samah Sabawi, Dr. Samah Sabawi, She authored a piece for the ABC during the period when Netanyahu was going to annex, large swathes of the West Bank, etc. Sent it into the ABC, and they were sending back edits as to, can you correct this? Can you confirm that? The tone of the edits and the tone of the corrections were they were Zionist.
Mm.
Well, Samah, did her best to navigate that and put in the piece, and it was published. And not 4 hours later, a Zionist hit piece was published on the same website, Religion and Ethics, on the ABC there. And it was a rebuttal, not of the article, but not of the contention of annexation, but a complete and utter hit job on the piece and on Samah's piece. And what we found out later, because she made a complaint, is in fact the ABC had been giving Samah's piece to the Zionist crew, and they'd had the opportunity to help with the editing, A, and B, were ready with their piece that they'd already had ready to publish, an opportunity to publish.
That's disgusting.
It's awful, yeah.
There's no other country out there that has the protections like Israel, do they?
Yeah, and I guess, I think, what's really key here, it's just awful, and it's an appalling treatment of Samah and Palestinians more generally. And it's reprehensible, and it's absolutely unacceptable from the ABC. And it's, like, they do it for themselves. Like, it's not as though, like, I think a lot of people sort of see this as a question of like a Zionist lobby or a Israeli lobby having too much influence, but it's also the ABC can just say no, and they need to be braver. They need to also have better politics. And, there's many ways in which the ABC should have better politics than they do, but they need to stand up against this kind of stuff and just say, no, we're not showing you pieces. We're not giving you the ability to edit. We're not publishing your rebuttal. We need a better media that is, and as a general state of Australian media, we need a less racist media.
Absolutely. But it's going to be tough on a country that hasn't reconciled itself for the crimes it committed in its foundation, that still believes we are young and free, that incarcerates Aboriginal children at a rate nowhere else on the world, where Indigenous lives and health is third world in a first world country. We're a long way to go. It's that mentality is so pervasive across everything. I mean, I commented on a Carlton football Facebook post, and they were like, the vitriol that came back is like, get over it. It's 200 years ago, as if the stolen generation wasn't a generation ago. That people aren't still dealing with that pain and trauma.
Yeah, and children are still being removed, right, and incarceration rates, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's no racial justice here until settler colonialism is dealt with. It's not, you can't tinker around the edges and fix it.
No.
It's fundamental to the state of this country. Just as in Israel, it's fundamental to the state of Israel. There's no justice until settler colonial projects are over and done with.
Well, Jordy, there is a lot of hope for us in the future, because there are growing numbers of beautiful Jewish people like yourself who can see that in the ancient and beautiful traditions of Judaism, what's happening today in Israel isn't consistent with that.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. It's Palestinians who are leading the way, and I'm just learning and following.
Oh, you're being too modest, Jordy. You're teaching us a lot along the journey.
You're doing wonderful.
So what we'll do also is I'll put a link to the Centre for Jewish Nonviolence. I'll put that in the podcast too, so if our listeners want to click on that and get in touch. And thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next week, share the podcast, and remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.